Ki-woo Kim, a young man, lives in poverty with his family in the slums of South Korean City. They reside in a garden unit where finding a Wi-Fi signal is a constant struggle for internet access to watch TV. Their living conditions include dealing with fumigation, and they are forced to witness unpleasant scenes like men urinating in the alley outside their home. To make ends meet, they take on menial tasks such as folding pizza boxes, but even then, they face criticism from the pizza employees for their mistakes. Ki-woo's wealthy friend Min-hyuk visits the family, bringing them a gift, a rock believed to bring wealth and prosperity to its possessor. Then, Min-hyuk reveals that he has been tutoring the wealthy family's teenage daughter but is leaving for studies abroad. He confesses his love for the daughter and fears that other university boys might win her over in his absence. Min-hyuk wants Ki-woo to take over as her tutor, trusting him to watch over her until Min-hyuk can propose after her high school graduation. Despite Ki-woo lacking college qualifications, Min-hyuk assures him he'll vouch for him. So, Ki-woo agrees and has his sister Ki-young forge credentials for him to use in the interview. Ki-woo attends an interview with the wealthy Park family, meeting Mrs. Park and their children Da-hae and Da-sung. In order to secure the job, Ki-woo realizes he needs to charm Da-hae. Mrs. Park ends up paying him a substantial amount, and she also mentions they are looking for an art tutor for Da-sung, who had a traumatic experience and needs assistance with his art. Ki-woo introduces them to his sister Ki-young, who goes by the name Jessica using forged documents. She, too, starts making a considerable amount of money. To retaliate against the Park family's limo driver, Ki-young leaves her underwear in the car, leading to his dismissal. She then recommends her uncle as the new driver, who is actually her father Ki-taek. The final position is that of the housekeeper, Moon Kwang. She has been working in the house since before the Park family moved in, previously employed by the eccentric architect who owned the home. To get her fired, the Kims take advantage of her allergy to peaches, triggering allergic reactions. They then persuade Mrs. Park that Moon Kwang is seriously contagious and cannot be around their son. Devastated, Moon Kwang leaves her job, and Mrs. Kim is hired in her place. This deception ultimately leads the Park family to unknowingly employ the entire Kim family. The Kim family enjoys the significant increase in their income. When the Park family decides to go camping for Da-sung's birthday weekend, the Kims take advantage of the opportunity to stay in the large Park house. They spend the evening indulging in drinks, food, and making a mess of the place. However, their party is interrupted when Moon Kwang, the former housekeeper, unexpectedly shows up at the door. Claiming she left something behind, she requests to retrieve it. Mrs. Kim unwillingly allows her inside, and Moon Kwang discovers a secret passage in the basement, leading to her husband Gun-sae. He has been living in the bunker since the previous owner moved out to hide from loan sharks. Moon Kwang feeds her husband in the bunker, and Mrs. Kim is shocked by the sight. Mrs. Kim informs Moon Kwang that she must leave. Despite Moon Kwang's pleas to stay, the rest of the Kim family, who had been listening in, accidentally tumble down the stairs, making themselves visible. They call each other with familial terms like Dad, which Moon Kwang records on her phone, realizing the deceit the Kim family has set up. To exert control, she threatens to share the recording with the Park family, using it as leverage to manipulate the Kims into complying with her and her husband's demands. The Kim family gains control over Moon Kwang and Gun-sae, leading them into the secret bunker. However, the Park family unexpectedly cancels their camping trip due to rain and will be home in 8 minutes. The Kims rush to clean up the mess, keeping Moon Kwang and Gun-sae confined in the basement. They do a decent job, allowing the rest of the family to hide while Mrs. Kim serves dinner to the Parks. When Moon Kwang escapes and tries to run upstairs, Mrs. Kim pushes her back down the stairs, causing a severe head injury. Moon Kwang and Gun-sae are locked in the bunker. Mr. and Mrs. Park end up sleeping in the living room to keep an eye on their son, Da-sung, who is camping in the backyard. This forces the Kims to hide under the table, remaining motionless all night, even as the Parks complain about Mr. Kim's smell and engage in intimate activities. Eventually, in the middle of the night, the Kims manage to sneak out. Upon returning home, they discover their apartment flooded with rain and sewage. Ki-woo takes the lucky rock, and the family spends the night in a shelter. The following day, Mrs. Park decides to spontaneously throw a party for Daesung. The Kim family, acting in their roles as household help, is invited and must pretend they are unaware of the two people locked in the bunker beneath the house. Ki-woo brings the lucky rock into the bunker, where Moonkwang has died. Gunasei ambushes him and brutally attacks him with the rock. Gunasei then enters the party and stabs Ki-young and Mr. Kim's son in the chest. Panic ensues at the party, and Mr. Park, desperate to take them to the hospital, screams at his driver, Mr. Kim. While trying to help Ki-young, Mr. Kim is tossed the car keys by Mr. Park, but they end up under Gunasei, who is in a struggle with Mrs. Kim. Mrs. Kim successfully kills Gunasei with a meat skewer. Mr. Park retrieves the keys but expresses disgust at Gunasei's smell. This triggers Mr. Kim, who loses control and fatally stabs Mr. Park. Mrs. Park faints, and Mr. Kim makes a quick escape. Ki-woo wakes up in the hospital after being in a coma for several weeks. He discovers that Ki-young has passed away, and both he and Mrs. Kim receive probation sentences. Despite an extensive police search, Mr. Kim remains elusive, especially for Mr. Park's murder. Ki-woo decides to leave the lucky rock in a river and later notices flickering lights in the former Park house. He interprets the flickering as Morse code and learns that Mr. Kim is controlling them from inside the bunker, occasionally sneaking upstairs for food from the new owners. Ki-woo writes a letter to his father, expressing his determination to become wealthy enough to buy the house and reunite their families someday.